Hi guys, and welcome to my Hunger Games tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to cover off how to set up and run a Hunger Games minigame using the prefab plugin system. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add the prefab and the loop presets into our Rust edit. So to do that we're going to navigate to our zip folder, open up custom prefabs, grab the Hunger Games folder and chuck it in our Rust edit custom prefabs folder. The next thing we're going to do is grab the loop presets and do the same. Now that we've got everything dragged in, we're going to load up Rust edit and implement this into a map. Alright, so I've got the got a map open. This is just simply a just a real test map, I guess. Nothing in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically put the Hunger Games prefab into this map and load it up. So what we're going to do is going to go into prefabs list, type in hunger, and then we're going to drag it out into the real world. Now it's always good to make sure that it is actually on the map, which is nice. In terms of placement, look, you can be it's fairly simple. Just don't have it too close to the water and you should be okay. Good rule of thumb is keep the lobby above the water and it should be fine. Look, it does have water triggers and stuff around it, so if the lobby does get submerged, it's not the end of the world. But other than that, yeah, it's pretty much good to go. So now we're going to select the prefab, apply the height mask, splat, topology, and alpha mask, and we're good to go. So with the alpha, it's like anything with Rust edit. It probably needs to be done a little bit manually. Doesn't, for some reason it seems to be a very hit and miss, unfortunately. So what I'll do, I'll just quickly do this manually. It's quite simple, just basically trace around the edges of the elevators here, and that way you're kind of guaranteed to have a nice good alpha. And this is the only alpha component that we really need to do. Cool. Alright, so the alpha's all done. Now this prefab has a series of custom loop profiles. So each one of these crates is assigned with the loop profile that we put into our folder, which was primitive items. And if you load the preset, you can see here this is exactly what's included, and these are the randomized amounts for each of the items included. So you can change this to whatever you like. I'm going to leave it default because this has worked quite well on my server. Every single one of these crates, if you do change it, you can change it within the primitive, like within the primitives loop profile, or you can create your own custom loop profile and assign it to each of these crates. But yeah, leaving it default will include the standard array. Other than that, the only thing I would recommend doing if you're implementing this into an existing map with existing topology layers, I would highly recommend going through and removing offshore topology. As you can see, I don't have any here, but offshore topology is generally what you find in oceans when you have topology generated, and it will prevent things like trees and whatnot from spawning. And the other one you should also remove is ocean topology, and ocean side, of course, because again, same sort of thing. It's going to prevent trees and whatnot from moving, from spawning. And if you are overlapping things at like beaches and whatnot, remove the beach topology and the beach side topology, because again, they'll stop trees from spawning. Effectively, you just want to have the default topology, which is field, forest, and a little bit of decor. And that's pretty much it. So what we're going to do is, well, functionally, you can change the layout as well. If you don't have to keep the same layout. If you are going to edit this prefab and change the arena, the only thing I would recommend keeping the same is this center part here. And the reason for that is the way the plugin works is it will identify this little gem down here, the Pookie Bear. And what it'll do with the Pookie Bear is it'll measure the distance between the Pookie Bear and these two buttons, and that's how it's able to automatically wipe itself and reset its data each wipe. So that when the server starts up or when the plugin loads, it's going to find these two buttons, store them in the data file, and this is how it controls the game automatically. So make sure those buttons stay there, and make sure the Pookie Bear stays there. Make sure these elevators stay within range as well, and make sure the height from the buttons of the Pookie Bear is the same height at all times to here. So you don't want to adjust any of the terrain heights around this area here either. Other than that, do what you will. You know, make it bigger, make it smaller. You can configure the bubble size based on that information anyway. Yeah, otherwise if you're happy with how it is, leave it how it is. So let's boot this up into our server. Let's actually have a look at the adding the plugins to our server, and then let's boot this up and see what it looks like in game. Okay, so we've got our server up and running now. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the plugins into the Oxide folder, like so. So we'll navigate to our Oxide folder, plugins, go to our zip file, go to the plugins folder, and we're going to drag the inventory manager first. Now, if you're running a plugin, so if you're doing this from a cold start when the server's offline, you don't need to do it in any particular order. But if you're doing it while the server is online, I highly recommend doing it this way. That way the buttons can get acquired easily, as the inventory manager is a dependency that Hungergames has. So now that we've got the inventory manager loaded, we're going to move Hungergames across as well. And you can see here that Hungergames found the Pookie, found the elevator, found the start button, all buttons are good to go. Now if we want to double check that and make sure it did load properly, we can go into our Oxide data directory and open up the Hungergames data file. And here you'll see all of the information, so lobby location coordinates, top center point coordinates, prize information, which we will be adding in a bit, p-entity, which is basically player information, the net IDs of the buttons, which changes each wipe, but obviously gets automatically acquired. Yeah, and everything else. So we'll close that off, and let's run through the configuration side of things before we get into the game and see what it all looks like. So we can go into our Oxide config directory, open up Hungergames, and we can see here we're presented with a few options. So let's just quickly run through these and I'll explain what each of them does. So time after initiation before the game begins. It's basically how much time can be spent in the lobby. So when the game starts, and by default it's every hour, the timer will basically start from this particular point. So it'll announce the game 5 minutes before it starts by default, which is 300 seconds. And then when this value reaches 0, it'll start the game. So this is basically how long you want it to announce for before the game actually begins. And this is the opportunity for players to be able to join into the game. Delay after Hungergames starts before the circle is initiated. So basically when the game starts, this is how long it takes for the circle to actually appear and start closing in. How often should we check if a player is outside the zone? So this is really dependent on your server and how much resources you have. The more constant this is, the more accurate it's going to be, but the more resource intensive it's going to be. I find every 3 seconds is pretty good, so it's just simply going to cycle through each player that's participating only, not every player on your server. And it's going to make sure that those players are obviously within the zone bounds. If they're outside the zone, it'll present them with a GUI, which I'll show you in game. How much rads should each player take each time they're caught outside the zone? So I set it to accumulate 3 rads every time, so it's accumulative. So for example, if they're out they're out of zone for when this timer hits, they accumulate 3 rads, and then next time it puts them from 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, etc., etc. Ring shrink percentage. Leave this default. Basically, this is to coincide with the actual circle entity, the sphere entity shrinking in. Time after circle spawns before it starts building radiation. Now, this is a recent update, and the reason why this exists is I added the ability to add custom end zones. So custom end zones, instead of having it the Hunger Games kind of end in the center, I've made it so you can add random points around the prefab to effectively change the end zone randomly each game. Now this is going to add a grace period where the circle spawns, because the circle may spawn in a very weird corner depending on where you've put your zones, and it may not stretch out across the entire map, entire arena. So this gives the players a grace period to quickly get within the bounds of the circle before they start taking damage. So 20 seconds I found is a pretty good value, and this basically means that once the circle spawns, the players have a 20-second grace period to get within the bounds of the circle before they start taking radiation. After the first 20 seconds is gone, radiation begins happening, every 3 seconds by default. Disregard the shrinkage events. This is really just to track the actual sphere shrinking within. So this basically just updates every second to get that information and keep it up to date. The outer ring distance is basically how big the sphere is. So you can make this as big as you like. 230 is basically the size of the arena from the center. If you want to make it bigger or smaller, it's entirely up to you. So just set this value to whatever you like. Dome darkness is effectively how many domes it's going to overlap to make the dome look sort of darker. So I found 8's a good value. It's not too resource or performance heavy. Whereas having it lower would make it less performance. So it would make it more performance based, whereas it would be harder to see. Whereas making it darker would be much more laggy for your players, but would be a hell of a lot easier to see. Minimum ring size is how much space in the center of the map is going to remain when the circle gets to a point. So if it gets to, by default, 20 meters, it's going to despawn the original sphere and spawn a new kind of like final circle sphere. And this will basically remain that size for the rest of the map. You can set this to 0 if you just want the circle to continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller and never change. It's entirely up to you. Announce player death. So basically when a player dies, you can have it announced to anyone who's participating in the game only that they've died. Heal a player when they kill another player. So if you want players to get some health back when they manage to kill another player, just to give them a bit more of a fighting chance and encourage less camping, you can do that, and this is the value of health that they get back. Minimum players to start a game. This is basically how many players the game will register and actually allow to play as a minimum. So if only one person joins, the game will cancel rather than proceed. Whereas if it meets the minimum threshold, which is this amount here, it will continue and basically play on and then award prizes to the winner. Command to join is /. This is basically a /chat command. So this is the command that will get broadcast when the game goes live. And this is the command to leave. Now I know the reason I added these is because other plugins do have conflicting commands. So change this to something that your server's not already using, because I know there are plugins that do have /leave as one of their chat commands. So how often should we run Hunger Games? 0 if you do not want it to auto start. So I do this, it's actually seconds, So it's basically how many seconds you want. Basically, you want to say how many seconds you want as a delay between starting. So easiest way to determine is basically 60 minutes multiplied by 60 seconds. So you can see that's 1 hour. Despawn bodies when the game ends. True. So basically, when the game ends, all bodies will be removed. Just basically cleans up after itself. Set that to false if you don't want that to happen. It also means that when the new game starts, none of the existing loot is remaining. Remove players from their teams when the game starts. Now this is I had a request for this. I don't usually do this personally because I don't mind people teaming up, but you might. So you can set this to true if you don't want your players to be able to see if you want to kick them from their in-game teams if they join. How many rolls on the rewards should the player get? So you can add rewards in using a chat command in game, which I'll show you in a minute. And this is how many times it should roll on that table. So effectively, if you want to give them, say, 3 lots of loot, you can set this value to 3. Whereas if you just want to give them one prize for winning, one random prize, you can leave it as 1. Clear data on new wipe. I'd recommend leaving that to true because what it'll do is it'll automatically clear the button IDs, locations, everything else, in case your map changes, and then reacquire them when the server starts up for the first time again. And the maximum time a game should run. So this is basically what the absolute maximum time the game should run for while it's live. So if the game exceeds this time, it's going to end the game prematurely and kick everyone out. So it's about 45 minutes by default, I believe. So it gives it plenty of time for it to reset and then get ready for the next one. Realistically, a game shouldn't go more than sort of 15-20 minutes. So if it gets to this point, it means that they're trolling or they're AFK or something's gone wrong there. Yeah, so that's it for the configuration side of things. So let's jump into the server and see what she looks like, and we'll set up prize information and custom end zones. Okay, so we are in our server. The map loaded up. So it doesn't have a monument marker by default, but you can add one on there. Call it whatever you like. But yeah, let's add some prizes and start a test game. So first couple of chat commands I'm going to go through you with is starting and ending a game manually. So you have the ability to start and end a game manually, and this will reset that 1 hour timer each time you do. To start a game, you just do /start HG. Once you have the permissions. One sec, let me just quickly give myself permissions. Alright, there we go. To add yourself, to give yourself permissions, it's basically hungergames.admin. You just do that through the Oxide on your console, and I'll put the permissions lists in the product description. But for now, we'll do start HG. You can see here, games will start automatically. So the game will start within 300 seconds, which is the default amount that we set. Now, if we don't want to wait 5 minutes for the game to start, we can actually put a custom value in. So we're going to go NHG, which ends the game. I'm going to go start HG, and I'm going to say 30, which will basically mean the game is going to start in 30 seconds. Now, for us to register and participate in that game, we're going to go. Let me. End the game there. So we'll go start HG, 30 seconds. We'll go HT to join. You can see the chat commands there. And it's added me into the game now. Now, because this has a minimum 2 players to join and run, this game should cancel when the timer finishes. Now, the game by default will shut off joining 10 seconds prior. That way, it gives everyone in the lobby ready to, ample time to get into an elevator, ready to go, and there's no sort of late joiners a second right before the game starts. You can see here that the game cancelled because there was, only 1 out of 2 players, and my items were returned to me. Yes, that's pretty much how the how manually starting and editing the game works. Now, to add prizes to it, so by default we have no prizes, and you can check that by typing /list prize. and this will print out into a console. But because there are no prizes found, it won't print anything up. So what we're going to do is we're going to add prize, and there's a couple ways to do this. You can get the usage of the command by typing in /add prize without any parameters, and it'll give us the arguments that we need to use. So we can list short name, amount, and skin. Now you can just do short name, and it'll default the amount to 1. You can do short name and the amount, which will default the skin to the 0 effectively, which is the default skin. Or you can do all 3 parameters and add a custom skin in there. So if you want to give custom skinned items or custom, loot, you can do that. So we're going to do is, first we're going to just get ourselves a 300 scrap. So we'll go add prize, scrap, amount we'll do say 300, and we'll leave the skin as default. So you can see add a new prize, scrap quantity 300. Now if I wanted to add a different variation of scrap as a potential reward, so we can say add prize, scrap 400. Now if we go to list prizes, you can see here there's our 2 prize amounts. Now if we wanted to remove a prize, we can either do it by short name or skin ID. So we're going to go move prize, we'll say short name, so we'll say scrap. And it's going to remove one of the scrap items that we had there. So we'll go back to list prize. You can see here that we only have 1 left, which is the last one we entered. So basically it's going to go from the first entry to the last entry in terms of the way it removes. No prizes found. So let's just add a scrap as a prize. And that's pretty much all we need to do for the prize side of things, but you can add, prize, add prize rifle.ak. There you go. So we added rifle AK as a prize as well. Yeah, so now what we want to do is we want to add custom end zones. So by default, the circle will be the end zone. So if you want that to always be the case, then don't worry about this part. This part is only for adding, multiple variations of the end zone there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and just teleport to a location, and we're going to type in add final point. So I'm actually going to copy this. You can see added position, blah blah blah, as a potential end zone. So I'm going to do this a few times. Add final point. Point and final point, and we'll just one right here and say final point. You can put this wherever you like. So what's going to happen is when the game starts, it's going to pick a random endpoint to basically move to. So if I've just added 5 zones, so it's potentially 6 points it's going to select as the final destination point. And when the circle spawns, it's going to spawn around that point. So it should be fairly easy, I guess, to identify what the endpoint is going to be, but it still changes it up based on the map. So for example, if the point here, so the way I've set the map out, or set the length and the width of the bubble, it's going to be, it should realistically surround this entire area here. Whereas if I have the endpoint here, the bubble's probably going to cut off around here. And this is where that 20-second grace period comes in, because realistically, if a player's down here looting and this bubble spawns, I want to give them enough time to quickly run back into the bubble without taking loads of radiation damage. So that's kind of how that works in terms of the bubble size and everything else. Things like the loot clearing and everything else is based off the center here. So whatever you set the default length of the bubble to be is how far away the loot and stuff will clear, and bodies will be despawned and players will be lootable, etc, etc. And it works with things like true PvE as well, so that it's support for that. So let's adjust the configuration to allow only 1 player to join, and let's load a game up and see how the circle spawns. Alright, so we're going to load up a test game of Hungergames to show you what it looks like. So I've adjusted the configuration file to allow for only 1 player to join. we'll get into an elevator. The game will prevent players from joining in the final 10 seconds, as you can see there. This prevents players from sort of joining in the last second and then either getting stuck in the lobby until they die or, yeah, getting kicked out of the game. The elevator takes you to the top. There's 2 exit points, the door that leads to the center, sort of circle of death, and then the door that leads out and away. So I'll show you the custom loot profiles and then we'll look for the dome spawn. Alright, so yeah, let's wait for the dome to spawn and I'll be back when it's back. Yay, the dome has spawned. Now you can see here that the dome isn't actually centered on here because it's gone to one of our custom locations. So I'm going to go to no clip and we're just going to see where the dome's actually spawned. Alright, so you can see here the center point's probably going to be around this point here. Dome kind of hangs over the edge there. And you can see that the circle radiation is now started, which means that 20-second grace time is ended. Basically what happens is the dome actually starts to shrink and move. So any player who's participating in the game that's outside the bounds of the dome starts to accumulate radiation, as you can see here. Now this will actually prevent players from looting things as well, because they're not able to, because it creates an overlay over the screen. So if I attempt to drag things out, I can't. So they need to be within in the dome to be able to do it. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the moment. Let's wait for the dome to spawn for the final 20-meter circle, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so the circle's starting to get a bit smaller now. So you can see here we're approaching the final circle. That's what the dome looks like on the outside, and that density is basically how visible that is. Now what should happen here is when the dome gets to within the configured size, in this case 20 meters, it will despawn and then spawn one static dome that no longer moves. So let's wait and see what happens. There we go. So you can see here the dome despawned and respawned, and it is now no longer moving. And that's pretty much it. So once this game ends, a winner is awarded, assuming someone survives. Otherwise, if there's no winners, it just simply ends. So let's manually end this now. And you'll see here that I'm taken back to where I originally started, and I have my items back. That's pretty much it. So yeah, enjoy. If you have any questions, send me a message on Discord or PM me on whatever platform you've seen this on, and we'll go from there. Cheers.